Howdy and welcome to the Mighty Mojo channel. I'm Chuck. I hadn't done one of these videos lately. I got angry at YouTube. A lot of that going around, yeah. Don't want to go into it. Doesn't matter. So, back to the Mandela Effect. Thanksgiving, we always go over to the a campground that's nearby, and that's where we have our Thanksgiving at with my sisters. And going back to synchronicity and how that kind of points to this being a computer-like world, synchronicity. Um, it just so happened that camping next to her, now it wasn't by plan or anything, but just by coincidence, synchronicity, someone that she taught in third grade was camping right next to her. Can you imagine going camping? Um, and you're getting away from your community. You're going to somewhere that's a little bit off, and there's your third grade teacher. Yeah, they didn't lay their camper parked right next to my sister and her husband. No, they at some point they moved. This area where we live at, and where the campground is. I'm not going to name the campground. If you've listened and watched other videos, you might probably can figure it out, but I'm not going to mention it. But anyway, the area is where when people want to rendezvous, get a little something on the side, they tend to come to this area because they don't really expect to bump into people. When we operated a store in the town that's near the campground, I realized that a lot of the people were, they were um, they were a couple, but they weren't, the official couple. They were fooling around, and the reason they went to this small town is they really didn't expect to bump into people. There's a nice little cafe next, in the town where they could eat and not really expect to be seen by anybody they know. Now, I don't know whether that was the case with the person that was camping next to my sister, whether he was rendezvousing, camping with someone he wasn't supposed to be with. I have no idea. But can you imagine, if that was the case? And of course, it's a small town and my sister pretty much knows everybody in the small town that they come from. I don't know, but the point is the synchronicity. Synchronicity. What are the odds that you would go to somewhere different and you would end up camping next to your third grade teacher? Synchronicity. It happens. I've seen it so often, so many times. It points to this world is computer-like. That's what it points to. Yeah, you can argue with me. I know. That's fine. I don't want to try to hammer anybody and try to say, this is what you've got to believe. That's not what I tend to do. I just, I tend to believe this world's computer-like, and one of the reasons I do is synchronicity. I'm not saying you have to believe it, because obviously you don't. No, you don't, man. Okay, that last section had an echo there at the end because I had the audio set to. I had the settings in. I had the settings where it recorded twice. There's a little there at the end. There's just a little separation between on the timing, so it created an echo. I don't know. I was having trouble with the audio to start with. The reason I ended up with it, I couldn't get sound, and then it turned out that the playback was muted. I didn't realize the playback was muted. That was the problem. It wasn't the recording. It was the media player, video player that I had the sound muted. I didn't realize. I'm an idiot sometimes. Chuckley would never have figured that out. um, so I've got where sometimes I watch Chaturbate. Chaturbate. Can I say that without being embarrassed? Chaturbate. And what I actually prefer to watch is a fully closed Chaturbate. Although I watch some of the other too, but the fully closed, the conversations, they just intrigue me. I haven't even registered, signed up to be an official person on Chaturbate. I just I I'm anonymous. uh, and it's interesting with some of some of them do the private shows after they do the fully clothed thing, but I'm more interested in is the fully clothed because the people in the chat rooms can be very interesting, and the person that's the cam model, I guess you would call them, even though they're just doing fully clothed stuff at that point, they can be interesting. Some of them are college students, and they get in discussing what they're learning in their classrooms, or are trying to get somebody to explain something to them they didn't understand in the classroom. So they get into philosophy and that kind of stuff. It can be interesting. Uh, One of the people that I like, they got into a flat Earth discussion, and it's really sexy when they start doing math to prove the Earth is flat. Yeah, do the math, man, do the math. Um, but I was watching one person, and the first time I'd seen him on it, although I think they had been a regular in the past, and I think at one point they actually did do the normal show. But this was a fully closed show, and this video is about the Mandela effect, and at times I just like to use the word sensitive. I pick up things. It's kind of weird. Chuck is crazy. That's what it is. You're crazy. Uh, but it was a he. Especially the fully closed shows, because they it the women in the rooms can be interesting, although the main person is a male. But there's women in the room, talking on the sidebar, chatting on the sidebar, and they can be interesting. Uh, One of the shows I watched was a couple, and in this case they wasn't a fully clothed, they were actually nude, and what they were doing is they were painting their kitchen, painting their kitchen fully nude, yeah. And there was one woman, and I'm pretty sure it was a woman, and she kept telling them, move the refrigerator and paint behind the refrigerator. Move the refrigerator and paint behind and they didn't want to do it. She wasn't tipping enough for them to move the refrigerator. No, she just wasn't tipping enough. But still, she wanted to insist, move the refrigerator and paint behind the refrigerator. And there's somebody I know that is bossy, and I couldn't help but wonder, my God, is she in this? Is she watching this show too? Because I could just imagine her doing that. Move the refrigerator, paint behind the refrigerator. Don't leave behind the refrigerator unpainted. Just don't do it. No, it's just wrong not to paint behind the refrigerator. Oh man. But back to the show I watched tonight. It was a fully closed one, and like I said, sometimes I'm sensitive and I pick up stuff. And this guy was obviously he was in a bad place. The first part of the show. He was just really, you could tell, just sad. It, I'm not sure whether he had a cold or he's basically on the verge of crying. I mean, and he and you know, with cameras you can sometimes the cameras can pick up lighting and all can create images. In other words, an optical illusion. That's a given. Um, so it could have been an optical illusion from the camera and the lighting. But in two different places, I saw a ghost in the room, in his room, through the camera, and I'm pretty sure other people probably didn't see it. Um, but it was one time the person flashed there um, at his closet area, and another time they were back behind, um, like he had an open door up into the outer part of his house, and I guess it was like a foyer area that the camera was focusing on. And at one point, it was like it wasn't a solid person. It was more like just kind of lighting. It was obviously in that particular at the closet. I couldn't tell whether it was a male or female or what it was. But in that shot, it was they were there and they were. It was a female. It was a woman. She was there and then she was gone. But like I said, it could have been like an optical illusion from the camera work, obviously. But I am sensitive and I do sometimes pick up stuff. But even so, I'm really not sure what it was. But that was kind of creepy. And here he was. He was kind of in a sad place. And mind you, this video is about the Mandela effect. And as he got to talking, he he had a court date tomorrow. Um, and the reason for the court date is he had been in a fairly serious car wreck, uh, and from what he was saying, at the time he crashed the car, he didn't have his license had been suspended, and so he was driving on a suspended license, and he didn't have proof of insurance or didn't have insurance, so he had to go to court. Um, and in part of it, he started talking about health problems he had. Some of these fully closed shows, there seems to be a fair number of people that have health problems. Now, mind you, they may do that so they can increase their tips. Feel sorry for me. Give me money. That could be part of it. This reason that they got their back aches and but he was talking about he had been diagnosed with some kind of degenerative illness, and when some of the people in the room started giving him tips, he said, "Don't stop giving me tips. Don't." So, you know, I don't think he was saying it to get tips, but who knows? um, but he was talking about he had the illness, and he was talking about where he had the court date, and he'd been in the wreck, and it was a fairly serious wreck. And at some point in the cam show, now mind you, he's fully clothed. It wasn't one of those, type shows. Somebody asked him to show his knuckles. Why? You know. So he put his fingers up to his knuckles, his knuckles up to the camera to show his knuckles. And the person that wanted to see his knuckles didn't really ever explain why they wanted to see his knuckles. Could have been a fetish. Oh, show me your feet. I want to see your feet. Show me your knuckles. Show me your hairy armpits. People got fetishes. So, but anyway, when he's looking at his knuckles himself, he's looking at them, and he at some point he had um, hit his fist against the wall, and he had his the area around his fingers had been scarred, and he was looking at his hand. And he said, "The scar has moved. The scar had been higher, and then it was lower." Now, in one of the videos, I talked about the scars. They point to something. the scars point to something, and especially if when they relocate, they move. Um, I don't really fully understand it, but in the video that I did on Have I Lived the Same Life More Than Once, I yeah, the scarring it points to something, especially when the scars move, and the scars themselves are like injuries from a previous life. Sometimes, not always, obviously. In this his case, he'd actually pounded his fist against the wall like an idiot, and he'd scarred his hand, but the scars had moved, and so he was sitting there and he was talking about his scars had moved. Now, he wasn't talking about the Mandela effect or anything like that. It just the scars had moved. That's weird. It's like in the video I did, the scar had moved from one leg to the other leg. Weird. Why? Um, so so the video that he was doing, it got me thinking about the Mandela effect, and of course one of the theories on the Mandela effect, which people hate, and I don't blame them. I mean, one of the videos I did that's got the most thumb. I hate when my arm does it. Quit doing that, you fucking arm. I used to have muscle, man. I used to have muscle, and now it's flabby. I'm 61 years old. Damn, I'm getting flabby. Chuck, you ain't flabby. You're fat. You're just plain fat. Admit it. You're fat, baby. Uh, I gotta start back lifting weights. I don't care if I am 61. I gotta get back to lifting weights. Um, but he'd been in a bad car wreck. The scars had moved, and like I said, one of the theories on the Mandela effect has to do with is this purgatory. And of course, when I did that, like I said, people hate. I just totally hate that idea, and especially religious people. I was a good person. Why would I be in purgatory? And that's just a Catholic construct. There's no such thing as purgatory. Well, Protestants believe in Hades, although people see Protestants are not like other religions in that there's a huge variety of beliefs within the Protestant faith. We don't all believe the same thing, but at least some Protestants believe that Hades is it's basically our version of purgatory. And some people say, well, no, Hades is hell, honey. Hades is hell. Hell is Hades. Hades is hell. They're the same freaking place. And it's not like a between world. Once you're there, you're condemned. You're just fucking condemned. That's what you are when you are in hell. You are in Hades. You are in hell. uh, but some Protestants believe that Hades is not hell. It's similar to purgatory. It's a between place, and if you don't make it from Hades or purgatory to the higher place, at some point you may end up at an even lower place. So the whole idea, especially with religious people, there's no way this is purgatory or Hades. There's no freaking way. No. But the thing is the Mandela effect itself is named after someone who some people believe was dead, and then they weren't dead. And Mandela was dead, and then he wasn't dead. And there's other celebrities that were people believed at least were dead, and then they weren't dead. Jim Nabors, for example, he's totally dead now, but at one point he was dead, then he wasn't dead, and now he is dead. Billy Graham's another one. There were people simply confused about hearing that someone had died and it turned out they weren't dead. Maybe. Um, we the media gets a lot of crap wrong. I mean, that's true. There's a reason Mark Twain, let's see, how does the quote goes? The reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated, Let me look at. I'm gonna pause a minute and go see what that quote is because I can't remember it. Right. Okay, so according to this, Mark Twain is the most famous person to have had his death reported incorrectly, but the story most of us think we know is actually a combination of two. In 1897, his cousin was dying, and a reporter mixing up the Twains, or Samuel Clemens, Twain wasn't his real name, uh, sent an inquiry to Twain's publisher asking if he had passed yet, but was corrected before an obituary ran. It was when retelling the story that Twain wrote his famous, though often misquoted line, "The report of my death was an exaggeration." 10 years later, in I guess 1907, Twain actually did get a premature obituary of sorts published. While he was yachting, the waters his boat was supposed to be in became rough and the air foggy. The New York Times published a piece saying it was likely he had been lost at sea. The next day, Twain, whose boat hadn't set off yet, got to rebuff the article with one of his own. So in the first part, the first example of when he made his quote, that would be an erroneous report of his death, and I guess we just accept that. But in the 10 years later, maybe like Nelson Mandela, maybe like Jim Nabors, maybe like Billy Graham, Mark Twain was dead, and then he wasn't. Or it was what it was written as. He hadn't actually went out into the ocean yet, the sea yet, and therefore he wasn't lost at sea. But why the error? Why did they think he was out at sea? And maybe he was dead and then he wasn't, or not. But anyway, back to the Chaturbate chat room with the guy that he had the scars on his knuckles that had moved. He was real sad in the streaming. He had a court date the next day from when I watched the stream. I've come back and added this later. It's being done on a different day than when I started it. Uh, and I saw the apparitions in the room like there was somebody else there. And at one point, it was like he also kind of sensed there was somebody else there. Like he kept looking, like he was hearing something. And at one point, without announcing why or anything, he just got up and started walking through his house, like there was something wrong. And then he came back to the camera and started back talking. Um, and maybe there was somebody else in the house. Maybe they walked by the camera and somehow invisible. That's unlikely. Uh, a magician, man. She was a magician. She was not an apparition. She was a magician. No, I don't think there was anybody else in the house. I think what I saw was ghostly. But now here's the thought, and this is a weird, crazy, oh my god thought. um, okay, say this is purgatory or Hades, and yeah, I know we don't like to think that. Okay, what occurred to me when I was watching his behavior and all, it reminded me of when I was at Arby's, and this was right after I first started reading about the Mandela Effect. And when I first started reading about it, it generally was in forums where people were wondering, "Am I dead?" Because they'd had near, death experiences, and they were linking the Mandela Effect with the idea that, maybe they were dead, maybe they were, you know. And after I was reading this, I was at Arby's, and this man started talking to me about how he had been electrocuted. So it kind of okay. But anyway, back to the streaming on Chaturbate. It occurred to me it was a similar type thing. It was like maybe he was okay. Say this is purgatory or Hades, and people enter this world. Um, and this is a creepy, weird, crazy thought. I get it. It really is. But It was like it was like the guy in Arby's. It was okay. Say this is purgatory or Hades, and people die on God's earth, and then they're here, and this would be a new world to them. It's a new world to all of us at some point, and then we adjust and we accept and we go on like it's like nothing happened. We don't remember what happened exactly in the other world. Well, we know something's not right. We think something's not right, and then we start reading about the Mandela effect, and well, maybe that explains it, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe we're just weird. um, but it was like he was new to this world. It was like maybe he actually died in that car wreck. He was dead, and then he wasn't. And he was also in the process of moving. He was moving out of his place. And so the thought occurred to me. Okay, say this is Hades or purgatory or whatever you want to call it, Orion's Earth, whatever. And maybe that apparition wasn't. This is so weird. Maybe the apparition wasn't ghostly. Maybe the apparition was somebody from his life in God's world, God's earth. In his mind, he was packing his bags, he was getting ready to move. Maybe they were there packing his stuff up. Maybe he had died. Maybe he was the ghostly apparition. That's so weird. I know it does, man. But these are it just occurred to me, and the stream was that it was that off. It was that weird. It was that odd. Um, but I realized, yeah, it sounds crazy. Yeah, I know. I get it. You start going down that rabbit hole, like I've said before, it's not a really good rabbit hole to go down. But still, when you kind of sense things like that, and you just okay, how crazy is this stuff? It's really crazy, Chuck. Get over it. Uh, but no, something something was off with the dude, and it just reminded me of that guy in Arby's. And when he was trying to explain his illness that he'd been diagnosed with, which is a degenerative muscular disorder, um, he was going over what might have caused it because he didn't know. The doctor hadn't explained it to him. And this is weird. This synchronicity. He mentioned that he had been electrocuted, just like that guy in Arby's had been electrocuted. They both had been, a really bad electrical shock. The guy in Arby's was talking to me. I mean, with him, what he explained he almost, he thinks he almost died. Maybe he actually did, but I don't know. It's you go down that rabbit hole. It's weird. It's weird, and it doesn't really fully make sense because we're not here by ourselves. There's other people. I don't know. Anyways, that's where I'm going to close right now. Yes, if anybody's actually watched this far into the video, the secret word is blue sky in the morning. Put that in any comments you make, and I know you actually watched to the end of the video. Blue sky in the morning.